international development professional and post-conflict transition specialist. He has experience in project design, project development, international conflict management, and mitigation throughout the world. He has experience in U.S. government-funded projects, post-conflict economic development, international crisis management, risk analysis, project training, design, and implementation. His work activities have included focusing on transitional development projects in such conflict areas as Afghanistan, Colombia, the West Bank, Gaza, Democratic Republic of Congo, Liberia, and Sudan. He's helped to shape and develop reconstruction and development strategies and activities at the grassroots level in southern Afghanistan. And he served in 2011 in Kabul as a governance and development advisor to NATO headquarters and to ISAF commanders General Petraeus and General Allen. Kevin is presently based in D.C., where he serves as an advisor and mentor for outgoing U.S. government officials going to Afghanistan, as well as different U.S. programs under the State Department, Department of Defense, and AID. Kevin.
I can hear you.
It's not on.
Okay, can you hear me? Good morning. I always know when an American steps up to the mic, I think. So, I think my colleagues have already said a lot of what I think is good for discussion this morning. So I'd like to cover a little bit more, and I do believe this whole 5-minute thing is also going to be an issue, which is why I have notes, because if you do know me, I will go on and on and on. But no worries, 5 minutes is usually what you get for a four-star general, except this time I don't have to use PowerPoint. So. The lessons learned from the last century are many. The 20th century was one of the bloodiest in all of human history. Conflicts between imperial states caused massive casualties, and for the first time we witnessed conflicts and direct targeting of civilians with losses numbering in the tens of millions. Since the end of World War II, interstate conflict has diminished extensively, while unfortunately intrastate conflict has risen significantly. During and after the Cold War, colonial ties slowly disintegrated, leaving imposed and artificial state structures lacking legitimacy and thus little power to govern and establish welfare and service for its citizens. These states, often referred to as fragile or sometimes failed states, have created a new challenge to international security, yet with a new focus on what we've dubbed human security. The 21st century is thereby challenged by a different kind of security paradigm. Borders are no longer physically restricted, and therefore neither are conflicts. No longer threatened between two warring world powers, the world has now turned to battling post-colonial woes, much of which has put civilians at the greatest risk. Civil wars, ethnic wars, cross-border wars, warlordism, tyranny, terrorism, and the like must be addressed not only as a military question, but rather a social, economic, and political one. I recently spent 28 months in Afghanistan, both on the front lines and at the strategic level. My experience allowed me to quickly learn the ugly realities of war, but also to innovate and to build civil military strategies and tactics that could identify and address grassroots grievances and support culturally appropriate conflict resolution mechanisms. Many people wonder the value of the ongoing war effort in Afghanistan, and I don't blame them. It's not easy to understand what this conflict signifies. Compared to the situation in Iraq, that has high levels of social and economic infrastructure, an educated population that can support government institution capacity, Afghanistan is in many ways a perfect storm. There's little of all the above. That said, currently they have a motivated youth movement, an ever-growing number of children in schools, which goes back to our comment about education, and a low desire and tolerance for extremism and unwanted violence. It's hard to tell by the news these days that there's some enormous steps being taken, but there are. In my opinion, Afghanistan has challenged the world to think differently through both a military and even a development lens. To think about how society can be organized into something that doesn't necessarily resemble a Western state, but yet be accountable to the international community and to its own citizens. It's not easy to accept, since our international political systems are reliant on the sovereign state, to take accountability for its people and their welfare. But what if the people just aren't ready for that type of system? Or what if they just don't want it? These are hard lessons that our generation faces in the next century, especially as technology continues to expand and connect distant ideas, groups, and even challenge tyranny and injustice, as we recently have seen in the Middle East and in North Africa. So what are some of the lessons? Well, hopefully this is where we can have discussion, because I already see my 2-minute card. But let me try to at least touch base on some of them. We've learned that although the integrity of the state institution still remains a central entity within the world system, that human security as defined by the UN must look more holistically at approaches including providing for individuals when a state is incapable or unwilling to within sovereign state borders. It means we must increasingly recognize that international human security must go beyond that of a sovereign state committing physical violence and focus on direct and indirect transnational economic inequalities, poverty, and access to basic human needs. None of this is easy, of course, and takes just as much action at the grassroots level as it does at the international political levels. The abundance of lessons learned in Afghanistan provides a rich source where academics, practitioners in both civil and military sectors should feed. Among them is the basis for how future missions related to peace and nation building should be conducted. To me, within this evolving paradigm of human security, I'm doing what I can to understand the fine line between military operations and international development activities. In essence, I'm trying to put theory into practice. Lastly, I'd like to close with this. Since Afghanistan is also well known for its proverbs, let me share one. The world will not find rest by just saying peace. Thank you again. I look forward to our conversation.